Hey everyone, and welcome to Bitcoin and Beyond, the weekly show where we explore the evolving Bitcoin economy and open digital systems. We talk to builders, artists, and founders that are building the infrastructure that's shaping this new world. I'm your host, Melanie Carstens, coming to you live from Cape Town, South Africa. And each week I sit down with a special guest to understand Bitcoin and how it is expanding across finance, culture, identity, and technology. Today, we are talking about art on Bitcoin and how the creative landscape is growing through or from NFTs through to Ordinals and the future. My guest today is Brett Herskope, a very good friend of mine. He is known as Eli Herf online. Brett is the head of growth at Gamma. I mistook that just now, and Signals, two key platforms in the Bitcoin and Ordinal space. He is also the project lead, and I sometimes like to say founder of the Pandemonium. We were going to dive into that story shortly as well. Brett wears a lot of hats. He blends art, music, community. So I'm excited to get into that with Brett. So, Brett, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Mel. It's a pleasure to be here. For those who don't know, Mel and I are old friends. It's kind of crazy because we met in 2021 and now it's almost 2026. So that's a long time in crypto, a really long time in crypto. So it's just a pleasure to call her a friend, and she's a wonderful person and a wonderful part of this ecosystem as well. So, I've been loving this podcast. So it's a pleasure to be a listener and now a guest. I've
Yeah,
been
so good.
well.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Like Brett said, we've known each other for a very long time. Brett was probably my first friend that I made online in crypto. So, yeah, very special relationship. And so I hope you enjoy the show today. Please forgive us if we do go down on a tangent and I forget that we're actually live on the internet. All right. So, before we kick into the show, I ask my guests the same question every week to start it off. And that is, Brett, what is your Bitcoin story? How did you find Bitcoin, or how did Bitcoin find you?
Yeah, it's funny. So it was 2015 and I was sitting at a really cool kind of bar restaurant in Melbourne. So Mel's in Cape Town. I'm in Melbourne in Australia. Um, Similar latitude, I think. And I was sitting at a bar with my buddy who got into Bitcoin first and kind of introduced it to myself and my group of mates. However, I didn't quite wrap my head around it. I sort of said all the things that are things that you still hear, like, oh, it's like, I just don't get it. You can't hold it. How is it money? Blah, blah, blah. All of those sorts of things.
It's a Ponzi scheme. I'm going to lose money. And everybody's also got a story about how they know somebody who lost money in Bitcoin, which is impossible if you've kept it.
Well, yeah, exactly. And so it took me till 2017 to, I guess, start to everyone sort of gets to Bitcoin in their own time. I know that sounds a little cliche.
Mhm.
And 2017 was when I really dug in and it made more sense to me. So Bitcoin was my entry. Obviously, hindsight's a beautiful thing and I wish I bought more. It seemed expensive at the time. Like it really did. I was like, unit bias is a real thing. I was like, I can't buy a whole Bitcoin. And it was something like 7,000 Australian, which would be like 5K USD. So
That's
you think
a
about,
terrible Bitcoin
oh,
story,
it's
Brett.
so expensive. But you think about it now. So I think as we speak, it's sitting around 90. So that's
Mm,
like what, 14x from there, which is huge returns for any investment. But it's very hard to think long term, and not a lot of people like to not a lot of people like to hold things for such a long time.
mm.
Investments, even people think about like APY when they have traditional investments and they're happy with sort of like 8% a year, and that's normally pretty good. To think that you would have got a 14x, not including where it got to as an all-time high, if you just bought in 2017 over 8 years, it's really not that long. And I have longer time horizons for Bitcoin than that. But yeah, that's when I really got into it. Started learning about it, deep dive. You sort of, once you go down the rabbit hole again, it's a cliche. You don't really come out. There's a lot that's happened between 2017 and now, but yeah, that was basically my story. I learned about it in 2015. My buddy still owns his Bitcoins, so shout out to my friend. He's like the person that I speak to about things. He works in startup land as well, so he's just always been, I guess, like a futurist. So I
Mm.
kind of owe my journey to him, and he's still a good friend. But yeah, that was it. There's nothing kind of too sexy. I just learnt about it in 2015, got into it in 2017, and then haven't really looked back.
Yeah. I suppose that is really the lesson in all of this. And I think the lesson in every person's Bitcoin story is um, they heard about it so early and they wish they had just bought more, because it's all hindsight, and I think that is the lesson of it all, to just pull out and look at what it looks like over. I actually did a talk recently, and I didn't realize I'd be talking to bankers. It was at a Bitcoin conference, and one of my slides was actually Bitcoin versus the bank. And I worked out that if you'd put $100 away, South African rand, for 5 years, once a month, you'd have 6 grand. Not, bank charges would obviously make that less, and buying power would make it less. And if you put $100 of Bitcoin away over the same 5 years, you'd have 18,000 rand. So it's just, and what a tiny amount. Anybody can afford that, But this is not financial advice. Please never take financial advice from me. All right, so we're going to then move into stacks and how because you were a teacher, right?
Mm.
Right before I mean, you were still teaching when I met you, and you were kind of like, you had just sort of moved a little bit into stacks. So let's go there to stacks and because it's a beautiful story how you kind of then moved into stacks. Well, what was called Stacks Parrot, now the Pandemonium.
Yeah, it was quite interesting. So obviously 2017 was like ICO mania, and like there were so many like bullshit Ponzi scheme like coins that really like flew or didn't. And so I was like dabbling, like I've never been a gambler. It's just not me. I'm not really like a degen. I don't fit that kind of like hat in the space. Sure, like we've all tried to, turn some crypto into more through some silly things, but more or less I just like have been a hodler.
Mm,
Sometimes to my own detriment, but at the same time I found stacks because I learned about it in 2017 and I just kind of tracked it. I found the concept of no, well, I don't even know if it was alive then. It was around that year, so don't quote me on the year because someone will be like, Stacks wasn't right. Regardless, I found, I think it was called Block Stack before it was called Stacks. I
mm,
think that was in 2017, but again, could have been a year or two later. And then when Stacks became a thing, I found which I think was the start of 2021. Anyway, I found it quite interesting because the block finality, the hash that represents the block, which is called the Merkle root, but the hash that represents the block through op return then settles on Bitcoin as a transaction and just like fits all that data that is like attached to in the block that you can pull up through that hash, on the Stacks blockchain, then settled on Bitcoin. So I was like, that's very neat because you get this sort of like extra level of finality. And then I explored proof of transfer, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of fascinating. It's kind of that Bitcoin uses energy, to power it, and then Stacks uses Bitcoin, which uses energy. So there's this kind of like strong relationship. I think the Stacks is not Bitcoin. Stacks is Stacks, and I think that's really important to remember. I think
mm,
sometimes that but anyway, so I found it really interesting because I was like, well, there are other like L2s, and there are things that like are trying to scale Bitcoin. Um, and I thought, and I still think that Stacks has its chance. I still think,
mhm,
that the dev power on it is really strong. I just think that obviously like product market fit is really important. Let's just see what happens. But I found it fascinating. I found it conceptually really interesting. And then I found Stacks NFTs actually through Trevor Owens,
mm,
who tweeted about a project called Crash Punks. And the art really caught my eye. I know you rocked a Crash Punk for a while. Yours was
mhm.
cool. And then
Yeah,
I found,
yes.
yeah, and I jumped into that server. Oh, so yeah. So to rewind just a little bit, I'd sort of like explored NFTs. I was fascinated. I was a teacher, kind of jumping around. I was a teacher. and I was a primary school teacher. I love teaching kids, and so I had like a passion for knowledge, and that sort of also helped drive me in learning about blockchain. Like I was really just like consuming. I wasn't really putting money in. I should have been putting money into Bitcoin, but I wasn't. I was just consuming knowledge. And in whenever, God, it's a bit of a blur, but we went into lockdown because of COVID. And so I was online a lot more. And then I naturally could spend more time on crypto Twitter, and then found NFT Twitter, which is like, there's a delineation between the two. My feed is like a little bit of a mix of both. It's more Bitcoin and NFTs and ordinals, and I found the concept of NFTs really interesting. So back then NFTs, now obviously ordinals has joined the fray. But I found NFTs really interesting because I grew up with a lot of art and music. So my dad was really into his music. My mum is like actually quite a very talented artist, but she had me and my brothers quite young. And then obviously like being a mother was her, she sort of didn't really get to explore herself artistically, which I think is a bit of a pity. It's a pity that was just of the time anyway. It was very of the era. But anyway,
you yourself are an artwork, so she did continue.
She did well.
There we go. She did well creating the artwork of great.
As a you.
There we go. My mom was actually an artist as well.
Yeah. Look, and it's so amazing because I think that everyone is an artist in their own way, whether it's a visual artist, musically, call it auditory, communication, written, a chef. There's so many ways you can express yourself.
Yeah.
So being a primary school teacher, the reason why I brought that up was because being a primary school teacher, you really understand the power of community. I also played a lot of sport growing up, and you understand the importance of community and feeling part of something. And then so NFTs are very based on community. Being a teacher, you've got your classroom community. There's like micro communities within your classroom. You've got your grade, you've got your teaching community, you've got like the network of schools around you, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many communities involved. So you really see how powerful, like I know that Jack Butcher calls it like network state effect and things like that. That you've got this ability, particularly digitally, to just have this like all levels of community, and it's global because there's no distance is not a barrier. And then I saw that obviously like NFTs was a really interesting mix between community, art, and the blockchain, which was where I'd been consuming, where my thirst for knowledge was. So I kind of like started off dabbling on ETH. I looked into Tezos because there was and there still is, so much great art on Tezos. And I loved it, obviously, for the art. And then I obviously saw how PFP communities, PFP projects also develop community. There are good things and bad things about it. But it sort of really drew me in. And then, so like I said, I saw Trevor Owens posted about this project Crash Punks. The art grabbed me. And then I was like, oh, it's on Stacks. Fascinating. That was like the blockchain that was like close to Bitcoin. Maybe these are going to be about as close to Bitcoin NFTs as we were going to get. Obviously, we didn't know Ordinals was going to be a thing yet. And I jumped in the server. I was online a lot because it was lockdown. And just kind of went from there. I was very active. I got to know the community. I started becoming a mod. I then sort of became like community something or other. Like I just ran like fun things and was just online a lot, and helped out at a bunch of other projects as well. And so I became really embedded in the community. Like,
isn't that how we met on the Crash Punks server?
Yeah, exactly. And here we are, like almost the end of 2025. Real friends as well. Shared real things off camera. And again, like a bit of a long story short, I noticed there was this project, which is now my project with my partner, who's a colleague of mine at Gamma, Albert, or Ciro, as he's known online, called Stacks Parrots, which is, we're not called Stacks Parrots anymore because we've sort of grown past just being on Stacks. And I also just don't think projects need the blockchain in their name, but that's like a side note.
Yeah.
And I took that project over, or I started helping that project out because their ability to communicate was very poor. Like obviously like being it's a global place. So, if English
Yeah.
isn't someone's first language, it's very hard for them to communicate effectively. And being a teacher, you obviously need very high level communication skills in English if you're teaching in Australia. And so that was kind of how I started helping out a project on ETH that I was like, hey, I helped out this project. Do you guys want some help? And then like one thing led to another. And then I ended up taking it over, and we've built from there, which is like a long story in itself. So I don't know if there's anything you want to like jump in with there.
Yeah,
And
we
then that's
will.
how I got my job at Gamma. But yeah.
Yeah, I kind of want to go through. I want to go through all of those as well, but just sort of touch on, because everything that you do is on the creative side. So why were you drawn? Was it because your mom was an artist that you were drawn, or did you have some sort of other underlying thing where you wanted to build for artists? Because that's primarily what you've done.
Yeah, I think that
And
the initial.
and community, but I mean, in terms of, besides community, we've spoken a lot about community. We are going to talk a lot about art. So I just kind of want to, where did that come from? That drive for art.
It's a really good point. I think that it really did come from my parents. Like, I really did appreciate the arts. Like, we
Mm,
went to galleries. I've traveled and seen galleries. We'd always just stop and appreciate street art. Like, our parents like really kind of just like fostered a love of culture in us. Um, I've learned a lot over the journey as well. So I think like I don't think I came. Maybe I didn't come in being like, I understand all the issues that that exist in the art world and the music world, but I was like somewhat aware of them.
mm,
And so I just and yeah, actually, it's probably pertinent to say when I first started dabbling in NFTs, and like I said, I garnered or gained this appreciation for the Tezos ecosystem. I connected with some artists from developing countries who were creating really beautiful stuff. And I posted on their behalf just because I thought that they had beautiful art. I'd collected some of theirs, but also others I hadn't. And I just received some messages from them, privately and also publicly, just like how impactful that was on them. And then I realized something kind of clicked, that the ability to this space provides the ability for artists. Doesn't matter where you live, but particularly but then to an extent it kind of does. So a couple of things I'll say there. In developing countries, where if you sell an artwork for $10, which for some people is $10 is like less than the price of a burger, or you can't even get 2 coffees for $10 in Melbourne.
mm,
But for some people in some countries, $10 is a lot.
mhm.
And so if they're a creative and the only way that they could sell their art is like locally in the physical, in the tradition, I don't even want to say the trad art world, because it's not even through, at maybe like a local fair or whatever, at a village, maybe to a tourist. I don't even know. But like, it's a lot harder. Whereas they can then, because they're like limited by their geography, but then
Yeah.
they're also limited by like who's coming past, who can afford to maybe even pay them a few dollars for the artwork that they've created, which is worth more than that. But obviously that's just like markets in certain countries.
Mhm.
Whereas if they sell, you could make up the numbers. If they sell like 5 editions for $5 each, $25 could be a lot of money for some people. And I just started reflecting on that very quickly, that it really breaks down geographical barriers for anyone. You don't even have to be in a developing country, but particularly for people in countries where they can accrue wealth that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to.
Mm.
And then obviously that's why blockchain is so interesting. I think then like it really clicked with me, pardon me, like very, very quickly, why this space is. Obviously there's like been things that I think, have hurt the space too, but I think it's like in a constant kind of like evolution and maturation kind of as we're going on. And like, I hate the cliche that we're early, but I think we're on this kind of like journey that's adapting as we go. But
And I
I think
hate
that
it as well, but I say
yeah,
it all the time.
yeah, that this space is like very powerful in that regard, because sure, it doesn't, like, again, it might be fun for someone who's in a country where $10 still isn't a lot, and if they sell a few pieces for $10 each, that could be a lot, just fun for them, or maybe they start making more serious money, or that aside. But I think, like, trying not to repeat myself, essentially, I saw the power in the ability for people to accrue wealth and hold their wealth and then call it in Bitcoin. Because other
Yeah.
chains, like, the prices have fluctuated a lot, but that they've been able to, like, control their own wealth. It's not in the bank,
Hmm.
that where someone else can, like, freeze their funds. And we've seen, like, it's terrible inflation in certain countries. Like, it's a way for
Yeah.
wealth to go to places where it doesn't go, and for people to be able to sell art, to be able to do that, and otherwise they wouldn't have been able to. So yeah, I found that, like, extremely eye-opening, and I was very inspired by it.
Mm. Yeah, I agree with you. And I think when you come from countries, I mean, you were obviously interacting with them because of your sort of early sort of art interest.
Yeah.
And I live in one, where a country where, a huge portion is unbanked, and cannot get bank accounts and need to send money back home, migrant workers and so on. So yeah, vital. And allows them to play, like you say, on a global economic stage, you know, so very important. Um, all right, so we're talking about NFTs, we're talking about ordinals. Why don't we talk about the difference? What is an NFT? I think it's interesting because I've spoken to a number of ordinal artists, Bitcoin ordinal artists, who are not actually familiar with Estac's NFT, and that they can go vice versa. Lawrence Fuller, Lawrence, who he's kind of doing what my husband Arno was also doing a couple of years back when Ordinals first came out, and that is putting your high res on stacks and your the smaller file on Bitcoin. But let's talk about that. Let's talk about the difference between NFTs and Ordinals.
Yeah, so there's, like, quite a clear difference, but before I say it, I just want to acknowledge that on some chains, and, like, particularly on ETH, there is on-chain art as well. And that was on-chain art before you could put on-chain art easily, or in the form of ordinals on Bitcoin. It's just, like, there's just less of it. So for the sake of this conversation, I just wanted to acknowledge it, but let's pretend, like, I'm just going to say, like, traditionally what an NFT is, and then in comparison to an ordinal. But I didn't want to pretend
Mm.
like on-chain art doesn't exist, because it exists on some other chains as well.
Yes.
Essentially, the key difference is when the artwork is on Bitcoin, the file or the data, because obviously everything digital is data behind, that's then rendered in a certain way, but the data is stored directly on chain. So it's stored in a part of a transaction that is confirmed in a Bitcoin block, and then stored on tens of thousands of nodes. Not unless you run knots, which is a tiny minority of nodes, but that's a story for another day. But they're stored on all of these nodes. What's a node? Let's just think about, like, all of these computers all around the world all host a copy of that data. So if one of those computers disappears, it doesn't matter, because there's, like, thousands of others. So it's like the most decentralized storage system that's going to trigger, like, I don't think any, like, hardcore Bitcoin is going to necessarily. Maybe they would. No, actually, maybe they do listen, but so that will trigger them a bit. But essentially, it's the most hard, immutable, decentralized storage network. Obviously, on top of it being the hardest money in the world, for that file to live. It lives on chain. Once it's on Bitcoin, that's it. You can't get rid of it. It's there forever, and it's tied to a Satoshi. What's a Satoshi? A Bitcoin has 100 million sats. Think about it like 100 cents to the dollar, or wherever you're from, like the smallest denomination. That file, that data is tied to. It's not on the sat. Like, some people are like, oh, my money's on sats. Like, I guess you can think of it like that, but the data is tied to a sat. And that's why I can trade them. So I can send you an artwork, because I literally am sending you that Bitcoin, and that it's able to be read that Bitcoin has data tied to it. And then that data can be represented on Gamma, or on a Bitcoin Explorer, or on, any other platform or in an Audi gallery, but that's different.
We'll
We
get
can
there.
talk about that later.
Yeah.
It can be displayed and and owned, because you own the Bitcoin. So it's funny, sometimes people forget that if ordinals are actually just Bitcoin. So if the ordinal goes to zero, you can't trade it. You still got the Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin goes up, hopefully that UTXO, which is a little package of sats that the ordinal sits in, because typically they sit in like a little package of sats. The smallest packages are like 330, but that's what a UTXO is. Kind of like if I have like 20 cents, I have 5 lots of 20 cents, I have $1, but like each of them is like a small package of my dollar.
Like carrying
And
around little pouches.
little pouches, yeah. And so I would send you my ordinal, or maybe you buy it off me because I'm an artist. That UTXO that has the sats in it, and then the one sat that has the artwork tied to it, goes to you, and you then hold that. So then the artwork belongs to you. I won't go more technical than that. It was already a little
But
bit
the
technical.
limitations are the file size.
We'll get to that up in comparison. So then the ownership part is NFTs. For the most part, you own a hash in a smart contract. So you own like a long string of letters and numbers, and that's what you own. So you still own it. It's yours. It points to you. And that that long string of letters and numbers points off chain to the artwork. So when I say off chain, it's not stored directly on that network. It's not like, again, for the most part, like on Stacks or whatever, the artwork doesn't live directly on Stacks. It lives in a decentralized storage network like IPFS or Arweave, which are actually amazing technology. So it's not even saying that it's bad, but there is an element of counterparty risk. And so we just don't know how long it's going to survive. And they're like, you have to pay to like pin them and blah, blah, blah. But essentially, it's not like tangibly owning the artwork. You're kind of like, you own something that points at the artwork. And if that artwork could disappear in certain cases, if the smart contract, that's like the rules that say like Mel owns this and Brett owns this and so and so owns this. If the smart contract isn't like frozen, like locked, you could like change the artwork. You don't. They're just like you could wake up one day
like
and
owning a link. I mean,
it's like owning a link that points elsewhere, but
is it like owning a more advanced?
Much more advanced though. Like it's not, because I don't want it to sound bad. It's not bad.
No. I don't. I just
different.
want to really define what this is for people, because it's weird that it's such a common term and everybody owns so many of them. But at the same time, people I still talk to people and they're not 100% sure.
Yeah, totally. Totally. And I think the key thing is that it's just that again, it's not a bad thing, but it's just not, you just cannot guarantee its permanence. Whereas on Bitcoin, you can. And for me, like, but I think that, again, I'll like preface it with, I think all blockchains, I think I like both. And I think that all NFTs should exist and ordinals should exist. And I think artists should put out artworks across different blockchains, because I think all blockchains provide something different and are kind of like a playground. It's like a spectrum, It's kind of like you hold your Bitcoin and you're not just going to like gamble your Bitcoin necessarily like you might with like coins on another chain that offer different, opportunities for that. It's just a big spectrum, and it's like know your risk. It's like, okay, if I hold Bitcoin, it's got these traits, and if I hold this coin, it's got these traits, which is like less secure or more like volatile. There's like a number of different things. We don't need to like list the pros and cons, but essentially it's just like knowing like why you're putting something somewhere or why you're holding something somewhere, and then just being aware of it. And so,
but nothing, Brett, sorry to interrupt you.
Nothing's permanent.
Nothing has to be permanent, but nothing has to be permanent. This idea of permanence, which is incredible. Okay, the idea that we can have permanence for certain things as a store of culture or a store of value, however you want to, because it works to me in both regards. It's either I look at the African continent. I'm looking to do a talk about it in January, where to heritages, or a heritage that comes from traditionally an oral culture, or or that have been kind of like dispersed, ownership of other countries, owning people's um, people's heritage, the language is disappearing. To me, putting that on Bitcoin is essential as a store of culture, because I think it's more than a store of value, and people still have to kind of learn that. But at the same time, your concert tickets,
Mm.
or you might want to have your home contract as an ordinal, but you're certainly not going to want your contract, your concert ticket, as a and or you don't have to, people buy artworks at, let's think about like Walmart, I think. I don't know. Well, here we have, places like called Boardmans or whatever, where you go in and
Mm.
you buy something for $50, or you can go and buy something for $500,000. You're obviously going to have that thing on Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think that
But
that's a great point. And that's why I was saying, like, I think each chain provides different opportunities because there are different costs associated with it. So
yeah.
it's a lot easier and much more accessible to put art on Stacks than it is to put art on Bitcoin. And so that leans back to what you were saying before. Like, there are file size restrictions, you know, financially, because if you have the money, you could really put like the world is your oyster, but obviously that can be wild for people and it's just not accessible for people. But so yeah, like to put it simply, there are like file size restrictions on Bitcoin. Essentially, like a standard inscription needs to be 370 kilobytes or less. One full Bitcoin block is only 4 megabytes in size, which is tiny,
Mm.
really, in the scheme of art. It's not tiny in the scheme of like financial transactions. Uh, and so what does that mean? It means that if you want to inscribe something that is 4 megabyte, it's going to cost you a lot, which just like isn't possible for a lot of people. And so what that means is that, and I'm dismissing recursion and things, but I don't think it's worth like getting into the weeds too much. Like you can inscribe a lot of files and then use code to pull them together to create like much higher res things. But again, there's like costs involved there. And that are higher than, say, you want to put something on Stacks. So why is it cheaper? Why, for example, well, why is it cheaper? Obviously, because like different scalability and the network's different. But essentially, you can put then big file sizes on when you're minting an NFT on Stacks, because the file is not stored directly on chain. So you don't have those limitations of block size, cost to put
Mm.
that transaction on the block, because on Bitcoin, you're paying for that block space. So if I inscribe a file that's 100 kilobytes, I'm taking up 100 kilobytes of space on that block when that transaction confirms. So,
Yeah.
you imagine it's like a square. You can actually see this on mempool.space. Imagine this square, like cut into, however many bits to fit, 4 megabytes, depending on the transaction sizes. Like your little piece, if you inscribe that file, is 100 kilobytes. So you have to pay for that block space. And then if depending on the network congestion and the price of Bitcoin, it's going to cost you, like X amount or Y amount or Z amount. Whereas on Stacks, it's going to be super cheap always. Doesn't matter if it's 100 kilobytes or, within reason, like the world's your oyster in terms of file size, because that file is
Mm.
stored off chain, which means, yeah, you can put a video much more easily, like an MP4, much, much, much more easily than putting an MP4 on
Mm.
Bitcoin. So, I think that's important to know. And like you said with Lawrence, that's what he's doing. He's still putting quality stuff because you can optimize and use different file types and whatnot. But for the sake of the argument, he's putting smaller files on Bitcoin, which is reasonable, and then putting bigger files on Stacks, which is also very reasonable. So I think it shows, like I
And they're
said, that,
linked. So they are linked.
well,
I mean, not linked as in actually, but there is,
narrative wise, yeah.
yes. It allows
Yeah,
them to
yeah.
do both, which I think is great, because
Mm,
I think the amazing thing about ordinals is that it's inspiring artists to think differently about art and how to create it. So I see a lot of that. I mean, you obviously see piles of it where you're going, okay, well, how do I artistically, what is this tool? It's like the camera. When people received the gift of the camera, artists were encouraged or inspired to think differently about art. And to me, it's the same with ordinals. It's like, okay, I want to do this. I want permanence for my art. how do I create these tiny files with art and still make them beautiful?
Mm. Yeah, look, so I think, like you said, permanence is really important, and not just for art, but for culture and so many different other use cases. I think that permanence is interesting. Like um, your husband Arno is an artist and a musician, and what he can put, and you're an artist as well. What you can put on Bitcoin. You want to preserve that legacy. Like for me, I think that that's really powerful stuff because like I have Jewish heritage. So during World War II, like there was like that famous book burning. So they just like tried to like eliminate literature by Jewish authors. And if physical books get burnt, that's it, they're gone. If your house
Mhm.
burns down, I hope, your house, I've seen, yeah, like you have artwork, as I do. I've taken it down
Yeah.
because it doesn't like look right behind me. But if something happens, those artworks are potentially ruined and gone. Whereas if
Yes.
that artwork is on Bitcoin, for example, it's so powerful for an artist because beyond your life that your work has
There's
been
a record of it.
preserved.
We have that
Exactly.
here. One of our most important art collection, uh, that was controlled by the government, was let to rack and ruin. And so you have some of the most important artists in modern history, and they are trying to restore this art. And I was speaking to the woman, it's an American company that are funding this and trying to, repair and bring or salvage as much of it as they can. And she said to me, they're taking, and I remember laughing, and she eventually was just like, and she said, they're taking these images. And I said to her, where are you putting them? And she was like, no, well, we're storing them, I don't know, some cloud somewhere. And I was like, but you're just putting them in another place they can get lost. At least have these files on Bitcoin. And she
Mm,
was absolutely like, oh my God, I can do that and they can live forever. So, even if you don't have, because you obviously, you mentioned my husband works with oil on canvas. Now, you cannot put those files in high resolution on Bitcoin, maybe for a huge amount of money, but
yeah.
you cannot. So, um, that's where the question for me comes in.
It's still a record though. Yeah, like
Yeah, it's a
I
record, but
totally.
you can't display it. And if we talk about what is the display of art in the future going to look like, which we're seeing
Mm,
it cropping up in many places here, where they have a big screen and they've just got art that changes every so often. So we know that's where art is going. So
totally.
we have to display the art. How does that, do you think that Bitcoin is going to get to a point where it's pointing, or is it at that point where it's pointing to somewhere that people can buy that permanence and still display it? Or is that where Bitcoin and Stacks might work together?
Yeah, I think that there's potential. I don't know how, like, I don't see like an interrelationship between like the ownership of it on Bitcoin and it being on Stacks. But I think what I
No,
hear
but
what
a
you're saying in
pointer,
regards to
like
file
a
size.
point
I don't think it will
somewhere.
point to another chain though, like because again, like I I'm not saying like it's not even a negative thing. I
No,
think that
I'm
like
curious. I still don't know the answer.
I've seen some people even like put their website in the metadata, and I'm like, that's just gonna be a broken link one day, and then that's gonna live
Yeah.
on chain. Like it's a funny record, but it's not necessarily what would be interesting. I know Megapont actually did this. I don't understand too many of the technicals, but I understand it at like an overview sort of high level. They put a collection on ETH and
Mm,
they inscribed all the traits on Bitcoin, and then they recursively called them together, which means they kind of like generated them to create the final picture, if you like, on ETH. So
yeah, maybe.
that's an interesting thing, is maybe you could, inscribe the traits, because obviously, you can break them down. So
Mm,
imagine like one of Arno's oils, cut it into like 20 bits or something, but then you can recursively call them Bitcoin. But let's just pretend. And then generate it and to present it in, higher res on stacks. But yeah, so that I think that there are things that people, I don't know if you can actually do on stacks. I know that they did on Ace, so
Look,
potentially.
I think where we're coming down to is that this is a gap that needs to be filled. Another piece of the infrastructure that we're going to need.
Yeah. Yeah. We're at a funny point in time where you can inscribe quite cheaply, but let's pretend like you can't afford it, which
Yes,
for
let's
a lot of people you
pretend
can't.
how it was when it was like
Yeah.
100 and something sats per VByte. I
Yeah.
mean, now it's like 1 or 2. I saw the other day it
Yeah.
was like
Well, you can
1 sat
inscribe
per
it like,
VByte.
yeah, like we recently
I should be
shipped a new
doing more though.
inscription. We recently shipped a new inscribing product on Gamma where you can use parent-child and all like the bells and whistles, like re-inscription and all the really cool stuff just recently, which is super exciting. What does that? I should explain what that means. So parent-child is what it's called. Essentially, what it means is on chain on Bitcoin, your body of work is like all linked together. So rather than it just being inscribed as separate inscriptions, which they still are separate inscriptions, but on the blockchain explorer, on for ordinals explorers, you can actually see that like your artworks are all linked together, kind of like in a family tree hierarchy.
Mhm.
That's fascinating because that's like
Collections. Is that what you mean? Like
collection.
with Arno, if
Yes,
he painted
yeah, yeah.
everything, if he went through a blue phase and everything he painted was blue, then he could essentially inscribe a main artwork and then put all his blue ones as part of that collection.
Under it, but you can tie them together and there's cool things you can do.
Okay.
And so that's really interesting. I should walk you through that later on, but where what it's really interesting because obviously something happens to us or in 100 years when we're not here, and then hopefully Bitcoin is. I think if Bitcoin's not here, then the internet's not here, and the Earth is not in a very
There's no
not in a very
electricity.
well state. Not in a very
There's
well
no
state.
electricity, right? Because
It's
unless
apocalyptic. Yeah.
nobody's gonna need art.
Exactly.
Money.
Well, and maybe that will be like even higher value because people, take who knows. But yeah, so essentially what it means is you can go, despite Gamma, despite any other platform, who knows who's going to be around then. You can pull the info off Bitcoin. You can see that all of that work was tied together and like tied back to like Arno Carstens. And I think that that's really interesting for artist provenance. Because when physical art is shipped around the world, as you would know, shipping art, it can be signed and certified and stuff like that. But there's no like obvious like web. You don't know the rest of Arno's body of work. You
It's a
don't know what
huge
else he
problem
created.
in the art world. It's a
Yeah.
huge provenance is honestly, I mean, I shouldn't say this, but I mean, to keep track of it, even yourself, records get broken, records get lost. I mean, we can't kid ourselves. There is no permanence in the art world to truly prove provenance. I mean, it's not easy, let's put it that way.
Yeah,
And Bitcoin
exactly.
changes that.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. And you can even you can have a physical artwork that has the artwork might not be represented on chain, but like the certification would be represented
Mhm.
on chain. So you can have like the just all of the certification, the authentication. They could just be inscriptions that just like have the data that say, that
Yeah.
prove that the piece is the piece. And as long as you've got that, you own that, or perhaps you even have it on a Sats card that's embedded on the back of the artwork or something, that's tied together. So it's just really interesting provenance wise. And so, yeah, we shipped a product that allows you to do that. But why I brought that up is interestingly, because fees are so low, the miners or some miners, not all miners who, confirm the blocks are taking fees that are like less than 1 sat per VByte. So you can inscribe something like 0.2 sats per VByte if you're willing to wait. So there hasn't been a cheaper time to inscribe. So you can get quite high res stuff. Obviously still not the same as what you can put elsewhere within your, financial reason. But you can now is an amazing time to inscribe for
Okay,
anyone
note
who's
to
watching that.
self.
Yeah.
Inscribe Arno's work. I'm writing it down in big.
Yeah. And there's some fun things you can do because early days you couldn't inscribe with parent child because it didn't exist. So like when you put Arno's first works on Bitcoin, you couldn't do it. But there are ways that you can kind of reverse engineer it such that you can tie them together, not so you can
Yeah.
see them together, but you can kind of like link them. So there's some really kind of like fun things you can do, because I'm very much of the belief that they're like, it's a bit of a cliche, there's many ways to skin a cat. Like I think some people are like, no, it has to look like this or be like this. But I just think like on-chain linkage is very powerful, like you said, from a provenance point of view. So yeah, look, that's the Bitcoin side. But yeah, like I think, like you said, there are the Empress Trash. She's an amazing artist. She's very
Yes, I have one
prolific.
of hers.
I love her. She's amazing. So if you're watching this and you don't follow her, look her up. Very powerful person, very powerful artist, you know, very talented physically, physical art and digital art across like a broad scope, from, you know, physical paintings to digital paintings to AI. Like she's just brilliant. And she speaks really well on how scarcity mindset is kind of bullshit, and also that she creates on all different chains. She'll put some stuff on Tezos that she feels is right for there, you know, more experimental stuff perhaps. She'll put some stuff on ETH that kind of fits her ETH body of work, and then she kind of keeps some things and puts them on Bitcoin. So the reason why I bring that up is because I think, again, like it's worth acknowledging that well, I actually think that it hurt the Bitcoin ecosystem, the Ordinals ecosystem a little bit, that they were like got a little bit holier than thou and said, oh, we're the best, and like you should only put your work on Bitcoin. I just think it became a little bit of like way too kind of like blockchain versus blockchain, which I think
Ordinal cabal.
yeah, and I think that it's better to just be so much more inclusive and be like, cool, like I love that Empress Trash puts work on different chains, and I'm just gonna, maybe I'll just collect her on Bitcoin, and like let's be so much more inviting, like so the artists know that there's like, it's not Bitcoin only, and you know, like you might be Bitcoin first, or you might collect Bitcoin only, but like we want the eco to be so much more inviting, because I think it did get a little bit holier than thou, and I do think that hurt the eco, and I'm like, you know, more than happy to say that publicly, really.
Yeah.
But the reason why I say that is, again, like it just like leans into that each blockchain is a playground, and it's just like knowing the pros and cons of each of the blockchains on that like spectrum of like, call it permanence, call it immutability, call it whatever you want in terms of like users, collectors, you know, whatever like metric you need. Just be aware of like the pros and the cons of it, on the spectrum of like Bitcoin being like the gold, and then everything else kind of like somewhere fitting in somewhere behind it.
Yeah, snobbery is not good. I mean, you know, there's the way I look at it is there's, you know, there's different countries, there's different currencies, there's different levels of art galleries for everybody. And, you know, to say that this art can only be for Bitcoiners and permanent, I think is disrespect. And I don't mean this disrespectfully. I just mean, I really think it needs to be driven home that there are all levels of artists. You know, you can't expect an artist who's just begun, you know, to give no value to his work and what he's doing if he's not inscribing it on Bitcoin. He needs another chain. He needs somewhere else that's going to, you know, and I agree with you that I think that's also only healthy for ecosystems, because I think if I'm collecting Empress trash on Tezos, and then I start investigating where else she's doing, you know, we're going to grow art everywhere. So yeah, let's talk about, you've mentioned Gamma. You know, Gamma is, I think, was it the first art marketplace on Stacks when it was still called Stacks NFTs? I think it was when Jamil and Nick began, but it may have. It was one or the,
It was
you know,
early.
first or second, very, very early. And that was Nick and Jamil at the time. But let's talk about that. So you are head of growth at Gamma and Signals. Signals is a new product that you guys have just brought out. Let's talk about Gamma. How is Signals and Gamma? I mean, I don't know if there's anything in particular you do want to kind of touch on when it comes to Gamma, but I kind of want to just draw back and look at Signals. I know it is a newer product, but or a newer platform or a new offering, but I think we spoke about cross-chain. I think the way Signals is, it's not only cross-chain, but it's it's whether it's an IRL or an NFT or an ordinal or wherever it is. So it's an incredible development or build. So let's talk about what Signals is and how that serves Gamma and people who, again, they're new to NFTs, they're new to ordinals, they're new to Gamma.
Yeah, so I think we're in 2021. We at our inception, we were called stxnft.com. We were literally called stacksnft.com. So we started as Stacks. When we, I guess, like rebranded, we became Gamma, which is the third letter in the Greek alphabet, like Web3. And we just, because we knew we had kind of like broader horizons. We had we all kind of got into Stacks for a similar reason, because we sort of thought that was as close to Bitcoin NFTs as we were going to get. And there were some really strong communities and a lot of builders on Ordinals like us, Xverse, Leather, the guys at Ordinals bot. They started on ETH but then came to Stacks. There are other examples, but they're probably the main ones. And also, like Hero, like there are a lot of the big builders, the main big builders on Bitcoin Ordinals, in the Bitcoin Ordinals eco, all started on Stacks, because we all sort of
I think a lot of the buyers, Brett, I think a lot of the art collectors, the artists, the art collectors, and the builders, I think that first rush was a big percentage of the Stacks community.
Yeah, because our developers were able to build very quickly onto Bitcoin, because they were building so close to Bitcoin in the first place. They're already hyper aware of the requirements. Because you can't, not that you should stuff around as an engineer, but you really can't stuff around when you're building with Bitcoin. And so we were able to not pivot, because we obviously still have our Stacks offering, and then we spent a long time building an integrated Bitcoin and Stacks platform where it's all in the same place, all in the one home, which is really lovely. But we were able to like extend and evolve and venture into the Ordinals eco very quickly. And early on, we decided like we're going to focus on art. The Stacks product is more varied. It's more of like a secondary market. You can launch whatever, as there are like lots of PFP projects. Not saying that you can't launch PFP projects with Gamma, because you can, because our launchpad is the smoothest, most robust, both for on demand and in pre-inscribed. But when it came to our primary focus, which is the primary aspect, it's not the secondary market, it was art. And we developed the Gamma Partner Program, and we supported really like all artists of all levels, and from emerging right up to super experienced who'd been around for ages. But we just saw the value prop for Ordinals, particularly long term, or for the ability to, for inscribing on Bitcoin, as art, because art's been a store of value for I don't know the data, but like hundreds of years, thousands of years maybe. But that makes the most sense. Bitcoin is a store of value, and art's a store of value. And so there's like that beautiful sort of like interrelationship. And then like really fast forward up until to this year, we launched Signals. We launched it at Bitcoin Vegas, which was really fun in March. And so what Signals is not a launch pad. You don't like mint there. What it is we noticed over the journey. So the reason why I sort of rewound to Stacks and then, mentioned Bitcoin and now Signals is because we noticed over the journey, working with so many different launchers of all different types and all different artists releasing art in so many different ways, that they run into like so many of the same problems. Like, what should my supply be? What should my price be? When should I mint? How should I mint? Like, how do I get like accurate market feedback? A lot of like, because they're kind of like a slave to the algorithm on X, for better or for worse. And you see a lot of like gamified kind of posts, and you're like, surely that account doesn't actually have 50,000 followers. Like, there's all these metrics that can really throw the potential collector off. So we built it for the creators and the collectors, because for the collectors, or the minters, if you want to call them that, You you never like, of course, unless it's like an artist that you love and you're like, I'm just going to mint anyway. You never really know, is the demand there? So that goes again for the artist or the collector. Like, do I have the demand? Then for the collector, like, is the demand there? If I mint, am I going to be the only one who mints? Like, I have to do this for whitelist and do that for whitelist. If you don't know what that means, it's like, getting your address so you're like allowed to mint, for a collection, whatever. Sometimes you had to like do tasks or like hang out in the Discord server. Like, there was like all of these kind of like pretty like laborious things, really. Like, it's a bit tedious.
Yeah,
and
it's
like you
fighting
get
to be in the VIP queue.
yeah, and
Guaranteed
like
entry into
no,
the
like no one wants to do that. Some people love it,
No.
but it's honestly, it's tedious, and it's not how like you're not gonna like walk into a gallery. This is not a great example because the gallery is probably gonna sell you the work regardless. But you're not gonna walk into a gallery and like bake a cake in order to be able to like buy the piece. You're like, you want to signal your interest, and so we built this product Signals, which essentially allows collectors to signal interest for a project. The project doesn't have to be like live. So you're not, because the big risk is, it's like you go to the artist drops their project or drops their collection for minting or for collecting, whatever, and it doesn't, hopefully it does well, but and it doesn't do well. Maybe the supply was too big, maybe the price was too high, maybe the market just wasn't like right at that current point in time, or maybe people just didn't know about it, or for whatever reason, or you just like, there's just like so many reasons why a drop may or may not be successful. Essentially what Signals does is it's a platform that allows like a decent amount, like, marketing period. People can visit the site, signal their interest, actually like bid. I won't go into like the mechanics too much, but like bid to essentially like have a spot to be able to mint. So you kind of like put skin in the game. You kind of put a deposit down saying like, I'd mint this for like X amount. That again, then that's really good data for the artist to be able to like, oh, okay, then maybe I should like set my price at this amount. There's like mechanics around that. So it's like really, really like when Web 2 companies, or like you've worked, in music, like people do a lot of market research in order to be able to like price something. How much supply should I, there's all of these things that happen. In Web 3, there's no really good way to like know whether or not you've got product market fit other than just kind of like going for it or hanging out on Twitter for a while and just like posting about it or running a Discord server. But like, even then, your Discord server might feel busy, but when push comes to shove on the day, someone's offline or someone's like, oh, I don't want to mint, or like the mint starts slowly. And so then like people who were going to mint then don't mint, it's like, there's all of these like,
there's also a huge difference, which you mentioned, the music industry. There's a huge difference in when we're selling music to, well, not anymore, but to people who, I mean, in the old days, we listened to radio. So there's a huge difference to people who've got hit singles, people who have got large live music fans, and people who sell music. So, you can't say, okay, that person who's got 4 number ones is going to sell 50,000 records on day one. You can't say that. And you can't say that one who sells out stadiums is going to sell 50,000 records on the day. They are 3 bizarrely different audiences. And I think that's what you're saying when it comes to art as well. There's no defining, there's no manual.
Yeah, exactly. And so what it does is like, it allows the creator to find product market fit. It allows the collectors to like learn about a drop and see, add signal. Actually, like, if you want it, like say I'd pay this and put a deposit down, like put skin in the game. And so everybody wins, because then if a project is successful on Signals and it then goes to its drop, that the artist knows that they've got a high chance of success, and the collector knows that they're going to be like part of a release is successful. So everybody wins basically. And that's the aim. The aim is to really like serve both the creators and the collectors. And then the reason why you said it's multi-chain is, or even for physical goods or art, it's completely like chain agnostic. It's even Web3 agnostic. So you don't mint on Signals. You could bring a project to market on Signals for Bitcoin. You can bring a project to market on Signals for Stacks. We've seen them both. You can bring a project to market for ETH, which we've had. We can bring a project to market for Solana, which we've had, and you can sell physical art, which there is, we've had as well. So like that's really cool because it's, again, if you're a lot of artists in the space, a lot of the artists also create physical things. Someone sold like clay pottery. We released the Gamma Continuum calendars. Other people sold like their physical artworks. It's kind of hard for them to do that, and so it kind of like is like almost like meshing the two worlds, but then also like meshing the blockchains, and allows cross-pollination, because if you come from Solana to check out a project and you're like, oh, what's that project? You might be like, oh, that's interesting. That's on Stacks, or that's on Bitcoin, or that's on ETH. I'm going to like look into it. Maybe you haven't collected on that chain before. It allows for cross-pollination. So yeah, Nick describes it as like the product that kind of like serves everyone and competes with no one, because really it just like helps you come to market.
Yeah.
And then if you go to market on Signals and you're unsuccessful, it's kind of like that's okay as well, because you've kind of learned. You're like, okay, like maybe I need to like reconsider my drop. Like if I just dropped that, I would have been unsuccessful, and then like you're kind of stuck. Whereas if you came to Signals and you do well and you're successful, great. But if you're not, you're like, okay, maybe next time I'll come back with a different idea, or a lesser supply, or like, whatever you've learned from like the feedback, because you can, there's like a comment section and an update section, and it just allows like real-time feedback, which is so important.
Yeah, and something massively lacking. I mean, I think one of the reasons why, another reason why I loved love NFTs is because it allows you to build, it allows you to build some sort of community around your projects or around your artwork, and find a price point. Because I mean, I remember the early Ordinals days as well. We had no idea when Gamma brought out prints. And we were all just sitting there going like, do we drop like 100 prints at $50 or 20 at $10? There was no way to find out how the market would respond to art on Bitcoin. So great thing. Okay. I want to take a step back. I should have done it the other way around, but let's talk about the Pandemonium. So originally Stacks Parrot, then the Pandemonium, it sits both as an NFT as well on Stacks. It sits as Ordinal. I still have mine in my Sparrow wallet, which I think I've got 15 Ordinals in Sparrow wallets that I'm too
Sparrow's a
terrified
great
of.
wallet.
I know,
Sparrow's
but
a great wallet.
I'm
It's very
waiting.
technical. Yeah.
I am waiting for it to start to have a front thing like Xverse, because every time I open that, like you were talking about UTXOs earlier, it's just like a spreadsheet. It's like you open it, and I remember everybody was saying like, be careful you don't send your ordinals, and then you're going to be sending, I just thought I closed those, I put them over there. And every now and then I remember that I have got my shocking pink Stacks Parrot with a crown on it, which is one of my pride and joys. And I think those were around 40,000, or
Early.
what was it?
Yeah, it was somewhere in that range. Yeah. The funny
Amazing
times.
time.
Yeah.
But so let's talk about that. Let's talk about, like I said, it's straddling both NFTs and ordinals. You've built both on Stacks and on ordinals, and you continue to build. I think one of the most high value projects that there is in the entire crypto ecosystem, I would go as far to say, because of what the foundational builds are that you've built for artists and for art. And I think there's only growth ahead of what you guys are building with the Pandemonium. So we've got the Stacks Gallery, which is where I think it all started. Then Parrot Radio, which obviously then moved, it was primarily on Stacks and then multi-chain for music, which I think is incredible. And then we've got Audi Gallery, Ordinals, your Ordinals Gallery, which is so I think let's talk about that. Let's talk about kind of we did speak about how Stacks Parrots began, and but let's talk about that sort of pivot, and yeah, let's just talk about those projects. And I mean, Parrot Radio is so dear to my heart because of my work in the music industry as well as the galleries that you built. So yeah.
Yeah, we have 3 products. It's pretty cool because we've built it all really with no money. So but out of passion and because we want to. I'm not trying to like cry poor or trying
Shout
to
out
get
to Brett and Sarah Albert.
And yeah, exactly. And also
Eon.
acknowledgement must be made for EOM, who is, he's gone, he's still around just like, as a friend, and he's gone back to just like working and supporting his family, which is totally fair enough. But, much love to him because he was a big part of our early dev work as well. So yeah, like I said, quite a little bit of time ago, I took over this project called Stacks Parrots. I completely pivoted its direction. We decided to build something. I was very inspired by On Cyber, which is a virtual gallery on ETH. I was also very inspired by, shout out to the team who created Cycle. I thought that was, they had so much potential. Those guys are amazing devs. One of them works now for FX Hash, which is a really cool generative art platform on Tezos. And but Cycle's still alive, but they burnt a bunch of their NFTs, and they built what was called like the Burnt Explorers like museum or something.
Yes,
and it was like a virtual experience for like checking out the burnt NFTs. And I was like, that's so cool. Stacks needs a virtual gallery. So essentially we're like, well, let's build it because EOM Games and Zero are both super capable devs.
Were they already involved with? Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, so
shout out to both of them and how you got involved with them, because 2 incredible human beings. I know both of them very well. I don't know if Ciro ever sleeps, because when I DM him with a problem with because I've got something every now and then with Gamma, because I'm trying to do something for my husband. He just replies almost instantly and nothing is a problem. So huge shout out to him. I really want to say much gratitude to him over the years. Anyway, so did you know them already? Were they already involved with the project, or did you bring them on?
No, so I brought them on.
Came up with the idea to build the gallery.
Yeah, it was really funny. So I met EOM Games through Crash Punks as well. And I was doing like essentially like a call with him, because as part of my role at Gamma is I speak to collectors about, what do you like? What do you not like? What do you want to see as part of our product? And then he was showing me just things that he was mucking around with, and he'd sort of played with the idea of building like this virtual environment. And I was like, oh, I've had this idea. And then basically he was like, oh, hell yeah, like, let's do it. So he came on. Then hilariously, Ciro, I do not keep it up to date. Like, admittedly, I had an Instagram, still have it. Can't remember the last time I posted for the project, for the Pandemonium. Ciro found, literally, I can't believe this, found Stacks Parrots, which we were called then, now the Pandemonium, on Instagram of all places.
Oh, word. Was he in Web3 at this point? Or was he just some...
Not really. And
that is incredible.
I know, came to the server, just kind of like, became part of the furniture, offered to like redevelop our website, and we were like, all right, like, let's see what happens here. Like, who literally, like, we didn't like give him any admin that he shouldn't have had, but he like provided like a new website and proved himself. And like, we've went through processes and stuff to know that we could all trust each other. And then he was like, well, like, let's become a team. And we did. So that was really cool, because the original founders, they weren't going to rug. They just didn't know what they were doing. So they just stepped away. They were like, look, like, you guys take it on. Like, we've sort of we started it, but we didn't really know what we we're getting ourselves into. You seem to have like a direction, and it was very amicable. So like,
Yeah.
hats off to them, because if they didn't start it, who knows? And so yeah, we built this gallery. So all right, well, let's just make it. You have to own one of the Stacks Parrots at the time to access the gallery. Like because that's kind of a cool thing you can do with NFTs. You can use them for gating various like online experiences. And yeah, we built this. Well, I kind of like project led, but they, my amazing engineers built this gallery. It was awesome. The NFTs unlocked it, so you holders could essentially head into their own virtual museum and immerse themselves in their art. It's like just like you would you'd walk into a gallery and enjoy your art physically. You want to have a place. As much as art looks amazing on, like, I think Gamma presents art beautifully, still it's just a different experience to like
Yeah.
be in a gallery like environment.
It played such a huge role, I believe, in creating an art market, because people wanted to see art on their gallery walls. It
Yeah.
was an incredible product,
Yeah. And it makes sense to other people. Like if I show my mom or I show my grandma like a gallery, she's like, oh, okay, I can understand you own it and then you can enjoy it. Of course you can have it on displays and things, and that's super cool. And I think that's evolving really well as well. But so yeah, it was hilarious. So on Stacks, there was some musicians. And so people owned music NFTs. I know Arno's released music NFTs on Stacks, and there is no like I don't want to like I love music. We were talking off air, and you could see on my X profile, like I recently took my son to a gig. Like I'm a big music person, and you've worked in the music industry, so you're much more experienced than me. But we were like, there's no good way to enjoy your music. As much as I work at Gamma, I don't want to have to go to a marketplace to listen to like music that I own, music that's on the blockchain, whatever blockchain that may be. It's just not like the music experience that we like expect these days, and so in the gallery, we're like, we need a media player. Like there needs to be a media player in your gallery, so you can queue up the tracks and you can maybe like watch them if there's an associated, MP4. So I know that's a file type that has music and or visual, so you can watch it if there's like an associated visual. And so EOM Games was like, yeah, cool, and like knocked it up very quickly. Like he's a freak. And we're like, this is so cool. You can go to the gallery and you can like listen to all of your music and hang out with your art, or you can just like queue up the music and press play and it will play through your music NFTs, and you can go to a different tab and get on with your work, but you're like listening to the music that you own, the music NFTs that you own. Or someone else can visit your gallery, because like they could type in your address and then visit your gallery. So it's a bit of a flex. It's like I own like the Arno 1 of 1 or something like that. And then we're like, around that time, Violetta Zeroni and Emma Miller and a bunch of other musicians on ETH were making a lot of noise for good reason around the fact that there were some platforms releasing apps, mobile apps, that essentially meant that you could play their music. Sure, you can like, it's the whole right-click save debate. You don't own it though. Like, sure, you can go to platforms and just download stuff, but you could essentially like play their music on an app on your phone without owning it. So it's really like not solving the problem that like music ownership via blockchain could. It's not there yet still, honestly, but it wasn't like, it was just like adding to the problem that having music on the blockchain was like, is trying to, or is slowly trying to actually solve, or at least be part of the solution to. And so we were like, oh, that is wrong. Like I shouldn't just be able to download an app and then just play whatever without owning it. Or at least someone should have to own it. Like that's crazy.
Yeah.
And so we're like, we should build an app where, like the gallery, a mobile app I'm talking about here, where, like the gallery, you plug in your address, so you don't need a wallet connect, because we just wanted to take that kind of like stress out of it for people, because we know that people just don't want to connect their wallets to everything, and there's like other security things and whatnot. But you can paste in your address and open up like whatever music app, because I'm not going to name music apps, but like have the music listening experience that you kind of like expect in the current day and age, where you can like listen to it while you're exercising. You can play, use Bluetooth and listen to it while you're driving. You can Bluetooth and put in your speakers and listen to it in your home, but you own it. Like, it's really cool. It kind of like takes us back to like, as you would know, buying a record, taking it home, putting it on the record player, buying a tape, putting it in the tape player, buying a CD, putting it in the CD player, whatever. Because streaming services, you can speak much more to this than I can, but streaming services like killed artists, records have killed artists in terms of like what they're earning. So blockchain allows like the musicians to sell their music directly to the collectors, the consumers, whatever you want to call them, the community, the holders, whatever. And then they can kind of like, they've bought it and they're playing it on something, but they've bought it, they've bought the NFT, they've collected the NFT, and then they can play it on their app because they own it. Yeah. So it's like very powerful, because that music that's being played on an app in experience that they like know and love and expect, and is super seamless and is like super modern and like really like brilliant, they can do it via Parrot Radio. So it started on Stacks, and then it didn't make sense to just stay on Stacks because there's just not enough musicians and music, and we worked with Violetta to like really hone in on how the app should operate, and we took it to ETH, and it's on Base, and it's on where else? It's on Polygon, and it's on there's like a couple of other ETH L2s, blah blah blah. But basically, long story short, we took the music listening experience that was in the gallery to a mobile app, and it's still alive. So if you own music from artists that have given us the actual like for example, we didn't want to just be like, if you own any music, you can then play it, because musicians should have a say as to like where their music can be played if it's bought, in our opinion. And Violetta was very strong about that. So the musicians give us essentially like the approval that if, for example, let's use Violetta Zeroni as the example, if they own any of her tracks, they have to own them, obviously, then they can play them. So like the music, it's very empowering for musicians as well.
Yeah. How do you gate that? How do you?
So we have a back end. Like the app has a back end,
Okay,
built with
so it's literally
code.
They can't, there's just no ways, if that it's embedded into that music NFT, that it can only be played
if you own it, and if it's approved. Yeah. It's like whitelisted to be played in the app.
Can somebody, if I gave you my wallet address, could you go and listen to my collection of music?
Yeah.
Because it's like, that's good for tastemakers and curators of music, because then you could also sort of, ultimately probably have people pay to listen to your playlists.
Well, I don't know if they can pay, because you'd have to be careful with like licensing and royalties, and like if I'm paying to listen to your playlist, yeah. But it's like it's really, if you think about it, it's like a digital way to like go around to someone's house who owns a rare Beatles record, and they own it. It's in their house. They can put on their record player. It's like, okay, you can go to my like wallet address, but I own it. Like, you can't do anything with it. All you can do is listen to it, just like you could go on chain and do the same thing, or go onto a platform and do it. It's like a flex for people, really. It's like, but also it allows, sure, like it means that I don't have to own it, but the key difference is that it is owned. Like the musician was paid already. So like, that's like that's massive.
And I think it's, when we originally were looking as well at music videos being, we were talking about back in the day when, music videos we were putting on Stacks, that it's kind of decentralizing YouTube, because it's allowing each person to own a piece of a visual, and then you've got to kind of seek out those tastemakers. So not only the artist, but it adds that other lovely layer to music, giving people that flex, where that's what people like doing. If they can't be the artist, that's one step closer to 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 being, like you were saying, you love music. What an incredible thing if you owned 20 uh, pieces of music that were firsts in artists' collections, or you know
Yeah,
and
and
artists can send you, imagine also having that relationship with an artist where you can flex something that an artist has actually sent you because you are part of the artist community. So it provides some incredible layers to
uh,
the industry.
yeah, 100%. We can use Arno for example. Like, I own one of his NFTs, and so it's very different. Like, when I play that, I own it. You get like a completely different sense of like, it's a different experience. You get that like real satisfaction. Whereas if I go to,
Mm.
dare I say it,
Spotify.
Spotify and listen to
You can say
Arno,
it on this show. I've said it so many times.
uh,
Daniel Eck.
we hate and
I've said it many, many times.
it
So if I'm going to get in
there's
trouble, I'm in
no,
trouble already.
sure, I can, like, but it's just like there's not that same sense of satisfaction. I don't own that track, and I know that Arno's getting screwed when I listen to it. It's kind of a little bit, just, so yeah, it's like it flips it on its head, because it's like the modern form of music ownership, and it's the modern form of like music listening experience.
I still think there's, you know, we we can't assume that this is where that story is going to end. And for somebody who's worked in the music industry, s- since the late 90s. Yeah, I was only 3 when I started working in the music industry. Okay.
I know,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
I was a prodigy.
you
Um,
were.
so I think just witnessing that extraordinary move through technology, and I say this over and over again, once you are able, that allows me to draw back and go, okay, I was there when we were trying to sell CDs from tape, and I was talking to Trippin' Monkey. He was on our show last night, and his daughter, who's I think 20, is getting some tapes for Christmas. And he did say it. Okay, sorry. No, but he did say it on the Spaces. So it's not like he did say it publicly. Um, but and a cassette player, and she's 20. And but he said she's getting a pencil with it as well because of winding the tape, and I remember at the time, when we were trying to talk to people about selling CDs, and people saying, well, I mean, why would I, they would break them in half, they would take pens and scratch on them, and they'd say, this is just ridiculous, this idea. And then the next thing, not only were you using CDs in a tape deck, but you had bought they were being, you needed different factories and machinery to make them. You needed a different kind of, the quality of the sound was completely different no matter where you used it. It was an improvement in that. And the way music was sold, the entire thing was different. The way, the shape of the artwork. So, the casing of the artwork, this changed an industry so dramatically. I don't know if, if there's industries that have had this radical, and not only but from vinyl and record players to tapes, and, then to CDs, and this absolute kickback each time of, I'm not going to do this, this is stupid, I don't want it, it's never going to work. And when we moved into streaming as well, people were just like, why would I not have artwork? I mean, I want to have a physical thing in my hand. The next thing, everybody's got bags of CDs unless you're a collector. I mean, some people have got them displayed on their walls, but you know put away. Remember how we had piles of those flip books, piles of them. Then we're going to try and find a CD, and then the next thing, we've got our iPod, and obviously now our streaming. So, when I pull back like that, and I've lived that change, and I've worked in that change, to me, it's a very obvious thing. The problem is that we are now having to educate people. I think the primary problem is to pay for something that has been free for so long, and people needing to understand what they're paying for. It's not only the privilege to own and listen, but it's a relationship as well.
Yeah, it's so well said. Like, it doesn't almost need like any reinforcement. I think the concept of digital ownership is so new, whether it be
Yeah.
music or visual art or
Oh,
whatever. It's just so foreign for people. Really, like, we live it
mhm.
and breathe it, so we feel like everyone does it, but really they don't.
No,
Just the concept of owning some Bitcoin, art aside, and when I
it's
say
still
art,
foreign.
I mean the
Yeah.
gamut of all art, just visual, not just visual art, but music and everything like that. It's just so foreign to own something digitally for people, even though they just pay with credit cards and it's numbers on a screen these days. For the most part, and it's okay. Like, I'm not saying it's anyone's fault. But digital ownership, real
Yeah.
ownership, is just still foreign and needs education, and people. Yeah, it takes time.
Well, the
And
rails. The way I look at it is the payment rails will happen first. So people will slowly, same like when we moved from cash. Brett, my first bank account. Okay, I grew up on a farm. We would go to the bank. We would have a little book, and the bank person would write in a pen how much money we had in a pen in a book, how much money we had in the bank, and then put a squiggly signature in a block this big next to it
mm,
and a little stamp. Now, when I tell my son that, he just laughs his head off. He's like, "Oh, you got to be joking." And I think they will laugh when we tell them that we carried paper around as currency. So I think once people get used to, because remember as well, when we moved to digital, banking, and every second person was like, "Oh, I'm not going to do that. Somebody's going to steal all my money. I'm not putting my money and my personal details on the internet." You know, so that's the one thing that I think age really is a good thing, because it helps me kind of really understand that,
mm,
and to look forward, because we lived in such a physical world. To have a photograph, to remember how, say we lived, however many hundred whatever years ago, and I wanted a picture of you, I would need somebody to paint it. First of all, in the beginning, before that, I couldn't even do that. I'd have to see you to see what you looked like. Then I could get somebody to paint a picture. Then I could get a photograph, first black and white and then color. Then I could get a video, first black and white and then color. Um, and I think as we move even further forward, those are going to be, you'll be able to talk to me in 50 years' time. We'll be dead, long dead. But our avatars, our consciousness that is stored online is going to be able to be put in a person. So you've got to ask yourself, the reason I'm going around in a bit of a tangent here is, what is the art going to look like? What are these rooms that we're living in going to have on the walls? It's going to need visuals around us. We're going to have furniture, and just like we have skins, in-game skins. I'm a gamer, and I still feel sad when I look at my early Fortnite skins and think I don't own those.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I'm excited about it, and I think, like I said, I think you're a visionary uh, founder, builder, because I think you're building these foundational tools that, I mean, I've said this to you many times, 5-10 years ahead of when people are actually going to be using them, and understanding why they're using them, and needing them. So
yeah. I
yeah.
think needing's certainly a fascinating way to look at it. We have obviously like a passionate, small, well, not depending on the product, like, group of users. But yeah, and it's the same with Audio Gallery, right? So Audio Gallery is a similar thing, but on Bitcoin, to what we built on Stack. So it's an ability for you to immerse yourself in your art in like a virtual digital environment, kind of like how everyone was promising a metaverse, and we thought we were going to be like living in like Ready Player One, and we're sort of not
It's
yet.
still coming.
It will, eventually it will, but I think, projects were promising and people don't understand like the scale of building these things. So we've kind of built our own like mini, virtual environment, which I think is really powerful. I think there'll just be like lots of these mini environments, and who knows one day if they'll interoperate and whatnot. Like, I'm not making any promises in terms of what we're doing because who knows where the future leads. But there's things that we'd love to do. But in saying that, like it's really building for artists and collectors. So much like we do at Gamma, that ethos is kind of like bled across, or was always going to with me, into my own project, because collectors can enjoy the art they collect. And when I say that, they can enjoy it in their Stacks gallery, they can enjoy it in their Audi gallery, which is Bitcoin Ordinals, and they can enjoy it in their Parrot Radio app because their art is the music that they own. But they can also, in a very kind of like basic but kind of fun little like 2D kind of like wall of tiles, can like view their NFTs that they own on those chains as well. The visual art ones. But so that's for collectors, but then also for creators, for artists. A lot of artists hold, for example, one of our like Audi gallery passes on Bitcoin, because that's a way for them to show off their art. Because again, it's just such a nice way for them to like showcase and display their art. Like, shout out to like Lemon Haze and Zoe Louise and a few other artists who Pavel Dudko, who are like big fans of our, and Andrea Bologna. Anyway, lots of artists who love what we do and show off their art in an Audi gallery, because it's such a nice way for them to display like what they create in a different way to, obviously, than it just being in like the 2D kind of like fashion, even though, like I said, it looks gorgeous on Gamma. So like, I love our UI and we build for artists in that way as well. But like from my personal project standpoint, it's like just a different way that artists can also show off their art and enjoy their art. And also a lot of artists collect, so they can enjoy what they collect too. So it really, really is for like artists and collectors across everything that I do, from my job at Gamma into, my personal project, the Pandemonium, from, the Stacks gallery to the Parrot Radio app, musically, and then the Audi gallery, which has been super fun to be developing. Because look, I'll be honest, like, we were a little shocked. We thought On Cyber would just come and do it, and they haven't. So we're very proud of we're very proud of the little flag that we've planted. And it's been super fun and people love it. And we actually shipped, it's kind of funny, a lot of people forget, not that it's like a competition, but Ordinals kind of the first. So Casey inscribed inscription 0 in December 2022. Yep. And then 2023, like Gamma and then a few other platforms kind of came to life in February. We shipped, it was so basic, but the version like 0 Audi gallery actually went live in May 2023. So like right at the start of Ordinals. It was very basic, but you could still render like your Ordinals in a basic Audi gallery way back then. So it's
incredible.
It's evolved dramatically to now. So it's been super fun. So like, and I have a lot of fun doing it too. But I just really love serving collectors and artists in all that I do, really.
Yeah, it's weird. You gave me as we were talking, I thought of something. And, because we were talking about living in the future and living in rooms together when we're not even there. But I mean, that is an amazing way. Like, it's, you get a website of your portfolio and it's kind of this one-dimensional screen, for artists to be able to say it to anybody, go and have a look at my art. And it's actually, you can walk around and see it. So I think it's incredible. And I think, artists, go and get one. All right. Well, listen, we have, I think we've been talking for an hour and a half now. And I know we could go on for another hour and a half without a doubt, because, there is so much to talk about when it comes to art on Bitcoin and art NFTs as well. So I think over the months, we must do this every now and then, because it changes and it grows so much as well. But let's finish off with your thoughts on Because right now you were saying, I mean, it's, it's inexpensive to create your ordinals. The NFT market is kind of like on a bit of a, it's plateaued on the bottom end. Let's put it like that. So what does the future of that look like to you? How do you, there's a lot of people that kind of, are like, oh, well, it was a fad. It's all over. We spoke a lot about how we're still early. What does this look like in the next 5? Let's give a long sort of term on it. How do you see it evolving?
Well, honestly, like I wasn't in Miami this year, but like at Art Basel Miami, there was a blockchain digital art section, and they, Beeple and Jack Butcher and X Copy and some other artists
Mm,
were showcased, and
stunning.
and it was really busy, and a lot of art, Postwork, Jeremy, what's his surname? Booth, maybe. The like a number of Dmitry Cherniak, like a number of digital artists who like were sell NFTs, and some who have also sold ordinals.
And
Which,
profoundly innovative stuff.
yeah, really innovative stuff, and like mixed physical and digital, and did all these really cool activations. That's a big deal. Art Basel Miami is like traditionally a traditional art fair. And so I
Mm,
think I know that we laugh and we say, "Oh my god, we're early," but I think that we are actually early, because it's only that's like the first time that it's been really showcased like that at an art fair like Art Basel Miami, and I think that that's really exciting. There's artists like Michael Hufka, who he's stored, he's collected and showcased in like the Museum of Modern Art in London, like, and he also sells ordinals on Gamma and NFTs on ETH. Like there are artists who are like breaking down these barriers, and I think that what the future looks like is that there's much more integration into, like, for now, let's call it the trad art scene. I think eventually someone will be like, "Oh, I bought a piece of art," and then you won't know whether it was physical or digital. Whereas if you said that to someone now, they would
mhm.
just 99.9% assume that it was a physical piece of art if you said, "I bought a piece of art." Whereas I think in the future, um, that it'll be like, "I bought a piece of art," and then maybe it was physical, maybe it was digital. Who knows? You might have to like question further. We'll see a lot more people with digital art up in their homes. So, I have some some digital frames in my place, because like prices are slowly coming down. But then, I think they're going to be like way more accessible, more, as more people learn about digital art and collect digital art, they want to display their art, whether they're visiting it in virtual galleries, but also just displaying it in their homes. We're seeing so much more digital art showcased around the world, like recently at the Bitcoin MENA conference with the Bitcoin Art Society guys, sponsored and showcased artwork there. At Gamma, we showcase art at various events around the world. I think that it's just going to slowly, like that gap is going to be bridged, and it's just going to become so much more normal to own it. Because
Mhm.
we actually see a lot of digital art. Funnily enough, I got the train into the city because I went to a show yesterday, and there are screens at train stations that are showing digital art, and it shows who the artist is. No one actually owns those pieces, though. It's going to get to a point where, like, yeah, people are going to be like owning them, or like be able to buy from the art that they see showcased in and around cities and galleries and whatnot, via blockchain. And I think that it's just going to become so much more normal. So I'm not going to put any sort of like extravagant predictions out there, but I just think digital art ownership is going to be so much more normalized that you're going to see it in way more houses. And you're going to see it integrated into like way more like art fairs like Art Basel. Like that was a massive step. That made
Yeah.
me that made me bullish on like the future of it, because it was really well, like a lot of those artists sold a lot of work, and it was like supposedly it was like the busiest section of Art Basel Miami was those sections with those artists. So that's like very exciting stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, incredible. It makes me feel like heading straight over to Gamma right now and buying something. I must say, I've spent so much Bitcoin on art.
Stacks and sats as well.
I know, but
Collect art. I actually say that, collect the art you love, and
Yeah.
stack some sats. You know, like I think that people get into it. I think like that's the thing with this space.
Don't buy
Like,
it to sell it.
don't buy it to sell it. Don't like
And if
again
you
like
are, it's for your children's,
yeah,
for either for your children or your grandchildren.
because you don't buy a piece of physical art to sell it
No,
tomorrow. So
no.
we've got to try and start looking at it through that lens, and we're not there yet, but we will.
Mm. Well, on that note, I love that note. Both Brett and I are passionate art collectors, but again, not financial advice. None of the show has been financial advice. But yeah, Brett, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I forget that I'm interviewing somebody, and it just feels like a conversation. So, just a shout out to you and our friendship over the last years. I do appreciate you so much. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you,
Um, yeah. Okay, guys. So we've come to the end of the show. I do hope you've enjoyed it. We went on a little bit longer than normal, but I know every piece of it, especially if you're an art collector or an artist, is important. If you did enjoy the conversation, please, if you can, try and support my work in building independent media. I'd like to continue doing this, and I can't do it without your support. So check that out. You can find all the links to do that in my bio, and you can find also the links in my bio. To my YouTube, where all of the past shows are for you to watch. So, thank you very much to Brett. Thank you very much to those who've been watching. And we will see you next Thursday, same time, 11 a.m. here on YouTube or X. Take care and see you next week. Cheers, Brett.